This lecture will continue our learning of data frames, as it is beneficial and frequently used by finance professionals. We finished our last lecture with the loc method. If you remember, I mentioned that the loc is a label-based, name-based slicing technique, and the iLoc is integer-based selection. Let's start with very simple and build our concept on that. If you want to select the entire column in a data frame, the code is dataframe name df followed by brackets, quotes, and your desired column name. And if you want to see an entire row, you have to choose either using loc or the iLoc. What is the difference between the two? Let's find out. Let's select a row. For example, this row here, which is starting from a 0 base index, is the 4th row. Region Asia, country Sri Lanka. Please note that the first row is heading row, so the data rows starts from here. To select this row, the code would be like this using the loc method. Dataframe name df followed by a dot, method name loc, and in brackets your desired row index, which is 4 in this case, and press run. And you can see it's the same data row as in Excel file. Now let's try the same with the iLoc method like this. And we get the same results. So both methods worked well with the row index number. So why I mentioned earlier that the loc is a label based, which means that we have to specify the name of the rows and columns that we need to filter, and in iLoc it is an integer based index, so we have to specify rows and columns by their index integer numbers. This is a common confusion, but I'm sure the next example will make it clear. Our dataset index column has numbers, and loc is considering it as a string, a name, a label. So when we provide an integer, it searches for it as a name, where in the iLoc, when we give an integer, it considers it as a location or a position. Let's check this example. I'm creating a data frame from a list named ABC. That is my list. And in the data frame, I'm also providing index numbers. Please note that the indices are not in sequential order. Let's print to see how our data frame df2 look. And now I'm using the loc method to show me row for 1. Before I show you the result, I would suggest pausing this video for 5 seconds and answering this. Which row would it show? The answer is D. As you can see, loc did not follow the sequential order. Now let's try it with iLoc. Data frame name, the iLoc method, and in brackets integer 1. Again, pause this video and try to answer which row do you think it would show. B. As we know that in Python, sequence start from 0. So this is at location 1. So what we learn here is that the loc versus iLoc methods are actually label versus location methods. Loc gets rows and or columns with particular label. iLoc gets rows and or columns at integer locations. Let's see few examples of loc and iLoc. Let's select 2 rows from row 2 to 3. The code will look like this. Data frame name df followed by a dot and loc method. And in parentheses, our starting point of row followed by a colon and ending point of row. What we are saying here that loc, please select rows from label name 2 to 3 for all columns in the dataset. And here is our result. In the next example, we will slightly modify our selection. This time, we will select the same 2 rows but for only limited columns. For column names order ID to total profit. Please note that the colon used to specify a starting point and ending point of rows, where comma distinguish between rows selection part and columns selection part within brackets. And there you go. Now let's try the same example of selecting limited columns using iLoc. These are our column locations, data frame name iLoc, and in brackets, the first part is to select rows and the second part to select columns. Please remember that this time it will only show one row. As we discussed in the previous lectures, the rules of upper bound and lower bounds, where lower bound is excluded in the integer based selection. Do you remember that? And here is our result. One row and the columns. For columns, please note that here I'm using column location or position integers from columns position 6 to 13 rather than column names, as the iLoc is an integer based, not label based. Try experimenting using column names with iLoc and let's see what happens. There are many ways you can slice and dice a dataset. I would encourage you to develop a skill of searching on the internet to find new ways of using loc and iLoc and answers to any questions you have. Before we end this lecture, I would like to quickly show you 2 more things: reset the index and column names. Python allows you to change or reset the index to index of your choice. Why change the index? There could be many reasons. Maybe integers do not look professional in presentation. Maybe some code will use index columns and integer numbers do not suit the code. There could be a variety of many reasons. Our dataset index is integer numbers. Let's change it first with any of the columns in the dataset. Let's change our current data frame df index to one of the product column item type. The code would look like this: data frame name df followed by a dot, set index method, and in arguments the column we are selecting as the index. The next argument is about telling Python to make the change and then save it to the same data frame. If you don't provide in place equals to true argument, it will show you the change but it will not save it, so when you print the data frame again, the change will not be there. We can also change column names in a data frame using the rename method. The code would be data frame name, then rename method, and in arguments we will need curly braces. In curly braces, first we mention the current column name, after colons the new column name. If we have more than one column names to change, we use comma to separate many column names changes, and close the curly braces followed by a comma. X's define what we are changing, column or row index. And these are our new columns. There are various ways you can rename a column. This is just one of them.